Thank you for joining us again here at session 3 of Rebuilding the Walls. We've really been enjoying digging into Nehemiah over the last few weeks. In fact, we've only got to the end of chapter 1. Hopefully you've read a little bit further ahead, and we're going to dive into chapter 2 in just a few moments. But this session particularly is called Stepping into the Ring. So far we've explored how do we capture vision and then begin to practice it, begin to put it into practice. And we looked at the themes of seeing, feeling, praying, and then serving, and almost that being like a wheel of actions that we move around as the vision grows in us. So when I say stepping into the ring, what I really mean is there comes a moment when the rubber hits the road. There comes this moment where, okay, I've perceived something, I've seen it, I've prayed it in, I've begun moving towards it, serving wherever I can in small ways. Now I need to start going after this thing. And you may not even be at that stage. You may still be at the stage of, I've got no idea what the vision is. I've got no idea how to build the walls of the kingdom. If that's the case, do not panic. God has got a plan for you, and he wants to speak to you about it. And this may not be exactly the moment in which he wants you to do it. But if you don't know, I can tell you something you can be doing in the meantime. Keep growing closer to him. Keep growing in your character, because so much of our calling in God is about our character, not just in terms of what our competence or our outworking is. It's our character. So keep growing in character. Keep becoming more like Jesus in every single day. Don't just stop waiting for the great call to come from heaven. Keep growing to become like him, because you'll be moving towards the things that he longs for you as you do that. So don't panic if you're in that situation. But there comes this moment in all our lives, and this happens whether it's in our working lives, our godly vision, and we're building the walls of the kingdom, or it's just we've got to get a job done, where we've got to step into the ring. We've actually got to do the thing. We've got to make it happen. And that's what happens in Nehemiah chapter 2. So why don't you pause the video straight away right now and read chapter 2 together, and then we'll get going with it. So if we're going to step into the ring, just like Nehemiah did in that chapter, then we need to build our muscles. So what I'm going to do is give you 6 muscles to grow in if you want to become the kind of person that can step into the ring, that can turn vision into action. A few things for us to be thinking about that we learn from Nehemiah right here. And at the end of each of these muscles that I want you to grow in, I'm going to give you an action. And that action is designed to be something you actually do. That's why it's called an action. So you actually go away and do it. And you can plan to do that this week, next week, or over the coming few weeks. And if you do that action, just like going to the gym and you begin to work out your arm, if you do that, the muscle begins to grow. And so if you do the action, God willing, these 6 muscles will grow in your life. So whether you're about to step into the vision or not, whether it's something that's imminent or something that's in the distant future for you, you'll be getting ready to be able to go for it. So here they are. Here's the first muscle that Nehemiah shows us. Nehemiah was zealous. Okay, we need to build zeal in our life. Now, what does that really mean? Zeal is very close to passion. It's this sense of which there's a passion for the thing that we want to see happen. There's this zeal that comes about it. I love, there's a verse in the Bible where that word zeal is used, and it's a verse that we often hear in Christmas. If you watch a Christmas service online or on television, or you'll go to one in person, you'll hear this verse from Isaiah 9:7, when Isaiah is talking about Jesus being born into the world, and it says, the zeal of the Lord will accomplish this. So in order for this vision to come to pass, in order for the Messiah, the chosen one of God, to be born into the world, it's the zeal of God that will accomplish it. It's this passion, this zeal, this almost a pressure behind it that comes with passion from God that achieves it. Now, if we want to go into the etymology of that word and sort of dig into the Greek or anything and find out a few other words that zeal means, literally translated, we could use the words eager or enthusiastic. So if you think zeal, that's a bit big for me, eagerness or enthusiasm, they could do too. And again, all of us can grow in that. Some of us will be very naturally enthusiastic. You'll be naturally eager. But actually, those are things you can grow in as well. They're characteristics you can grow in. You can grow in enthusiasms, in the way that you think, the way that you talk, the way that you train your mind and renew your mind to be enthusiastic about the thing that you're going after. And Nehemiah had that in bucket loads. Now, look at this, and there's this zeal and passion behind it. In verses 1 to 3, again, it talks about the month of Nisan, the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. That's the king of the Persian Empire. When wine was bought for him, I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." I was very much afraid. But I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" So Nehemiah presents the problem. And this is a key moment in mobilizing the vision. It's stepping into the ring for Nehemiah. And the reason he has to have zeal to accomplish this, a passion to accomplish this, is because this moment could be hugely costly for him. In the culture, in the Persian culture, you were never sad in front of the king. It was not acceptable. In fact, you could be totally cast out of the court, maybe even killed as a result of being sad in front of the king. There was a royal etiquette. There was a protocol you had to follow. If you didn't follow that protocol, you could be cast out, and all kinds of awful things might happen to you. And so Nehemiah knows full well. That's why it says right here that he had never been sad in the presence of the king. That's not just because Nehemiah is the happiest man on the planet. That's because he was required to be happy. He was required to smile. He was required to set an environment for the king where it would be full of pleasure and happiness and joy. He's coming sad, knowing full well this may be the end of his job, the end of his career, the end of his service. And that takes zeal. One of the reasons we know that takes zeal is simply because the whole idea of passion, another way of understanding passion would be it's that which you are prepared to suffer for. That's why we talk about Jesus going to the cross as the passion of the Christ. Again, it's all the etymology of the word. It's called the Passion of the Christ, or the film The Passion that came out a few years ago. It's called that because Jesus was prepared to suffer for us. He was so zealous and passionate for us that suffering wouldn't be enough to stop him from pursuing the thing that he knew he had to fulfill. And so deep in us, we can grow this muscle of zeal, enthusiasm, eagerness, and passion in our lives. Working out, what is it that I'm prepared to suffer for? What is that thing that I feel deep in my heart that I'm going to go for with a sense of passion? I love what John White writes in his commentary of Nehemiah. It's a book called Excellence in Leadership. And again, a great little commentary of Nehemiah that you might like to dig into. And he simply says this: God mobilizes the many by the challenging actions of the few. And so often those challenging actions happen because people are with passion presenting something different, prepared to suffer for a change in society, a change to the norm, a change to what everyone seems to be accepting but isn't right, a change to the rhythm of someone's life that can take some level of pain to bring about that change. So we need to grow that muscle. So here's our action for growing that muscle. I want to start writing and talking about kingdom passions in order that you own them. A few sessions ago, we talked about how important it is to give language and vocabulary to things that we might be feeling because we begin to realize them more fully. And that's very true of these areas of passion. Things that you feel zealous about or passionate about, begin to write about them, begin to talk about them with a friend. The power of writing them, particularly for somebody who's more introverted, is that it makes it black and white and you can go back over it again and again and it begins to embed in you. But ultimately, you're putting in black and white in your writing what you really think and feel, what you're passionate about. And therefore, it begins to live more fully in your life. So begin to do that. And I guarantee you'll begin to see an increase in your passion for the thing you're writing about or you're talking about as you share that with others. You'll bounce off them and learn and grow. Here's the second muscle that Nehemiah exercised in this chapter. He relied upon God for direction. He totally relied upon God for direction. I find it absolutely fascinating when we read verse 4 together. The king said to me, "What is it you want?" So far it's going quite well. He hasn't been cast out of the court. Then I prayed to the God of heaven and I answered the king. Do you see that? We know from the session before that Nehemiah has been praying from December to March already, day and night, weeping, mourning, fasting. You'd sort of think that his prayer stuff is done. But there it is right in the middle of the conversation. When the king's saying, "What is it you want?" Nehemiah notes, "I prayed and then spoke." It's almost like this living, breathing prayer is deep within him. And he's saying, "God, I need you. We need your help. I need your direction. I need you in every moment of the step here, every step of the way." It's like a directional thing, asking for God to breathe, God to do something, God to change your mindset, God to interrupt the situation so that it goes God's way. And Nehemiah is absolutely committed to it. So we can learn that practice of praying. It's so easy, isn't it? In the excitement of delivering something, we forget to pray. Or sometimes the confusion of a situation. I don't know what God wants me to do. And sometimes I've expressed that to kind of coaches or mentors of mine. I'm like, I just don't know. I feel confused about this. And they'll often say to me, well, what does God say about it? And to my shame, as a vicar in the church, I sometimes think, do you know, I don't think I've even talked to God about that. It's so easy to do. We just stumble into it. But to take moments and learn rhythms in our life where we just pause in that conversation. God, what is it you're doing? Where we draw aside and say, God, well, there's this confusion. What is it you would say? And we make space to listen to God, not just to declare our prayers, but to hear what he has to say back to us. Now, there's so much we could talk about in the art of hearing God's voice, and this particular series isn't about that. Maybe there'll be another one about that you can do as an HTB group. But the first step I want to encourage you to do is in practicing to hear God's voice is to ask him. That's your action. Just simply, I want to encourage you every single day, ask God to speak and give him a few moments of silence to do so. That's it. That's the action. Just write that into your diary, into your rhythm somewhere. Just ask, God, would you speak? And maybe you may just begin to perceive, is God saying that? He may remind you of something. A word or a scripture may come to mind. A picture may come to mind. A sense of his presence might just nudge you in a particular direction. As you ask him to speak, it may be that you're reminded of something. You think, well, is that God or not? And what I'd encourage you to do is then act on that. Because only upon acting upon that can you assess whether that was God or not. So there's a process. Ask, act, assess. And keep doing that every time you ask God. Ask, act, assess. And bit by bit, you might begin to stumble across, do you know, I think that was God speaking to me. Do you know, I think I did sense him encouraging me in this direction. I think he did ask me to write that text to that person. I think he has asked me to do this, because you're asking, you're acting, and you're assessing. If you just asked, but you never act, you're never going to be able to assess as to whether it's actually God speaking to you. So that's the simple route that you go down. So there's the action. Ask every single day, okay, and go for it. We could tell lots of stories of where God has spoken. Many of them are captured here, and clearly God has spoken to Nehemiah, and that's why God is giving him favor in front of the king. Go for it. Ask every day. Third muscle that Nehemiah is exercising in this passage is overcoming the presence of failure and fear. This is a really big one, and again, could be an entire session. Look at what it says in verse 19. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about the reality that Nehemiah was going to come and build these walls, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is it that you're doing? They asked. You are rebelling against the king. They're trying to instill fear, and they're provoking failure. You're never going to do this. This wall that you think you're going to build is never going to go up. You think you can achieve something? Absolutely no way. Somebody hasn't given you authority. Where's your authority from? This cannot be achieved. Now, these are the kind of things that we hear from other people when we step into the boldness of any kind of vision, any kind of kingdom building, any kind of standing up for Jesus in our day and age. We're going to get the rebuffals of some people's questions. What's more profound sometimes is that those questions are going to come from inside our own head. Who am I to step up and do anything? Who am I to build the walls of God's kingdom? Who am I to bring about any kind of change in my workplace, with my friendship group, in my family? How could I do that? And these words come against us that are meant to provoke fear and failure. Well, there's so much that we said, but one thing to say is this. God's perfect love wants to cast out all fear. He wants to speak life over you. So if you ever think those words are coming from the heart of God, I can tell you they're not. God wants to breathe life in you in all its fullness so that you can fulfill the things of his kingdom. And you need to keep listening to his voice as you ask him for direction. But also, we need to keep growing in courage. I'm not always very good at this. Sometimes I'm courageous, sometimes I'm not. You put me on a ladder going up to a height and my legs start quaking. Literally, they start shaking because I'm scared of heights. There's a deep fear in me. Now, that's one of the irrational fears, but there are all sorts of other fears that are also irrational, but somehow they've embedded in me. And I need to keep bringing them before God and saying, God, would you encourage me? Give me courage. Literally put courage into me so that it might grow. All the people throughout history and through the history of these scriptures have had to ask God for courage. Moses didn't think he could go and do anything in Egypt. And so God had to say, no, I'm going to be with you. And Moses is still complaining, saying, I can never do it. But he sends Aaron to encourage him. Gideon says, there's no way I can make this happen. How could I ever take and lead an army? But God puts courage into him. Mary has great courage as she responds to the angel. And the angel says, you're going to carry the very Son of God. And so she falls on her knees and prays to God and asks him, recognizing her reliance on him. You can ask God for courage and build courage in your life. I love what Nelson Mandela wrote in his famous quote about courage. Let me read it and remind us of it. He said this, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. I need to remember that next time I go up a ladder. But I also need to remember that next time I feel scared about the thing that I might step into. And one of the ways in which I want to grow in courage, and maybe this is helpful for you, is to focus on courage and begin to learn what courage looks like and how I can grow in that. In fact, our family have a number of family values. We have 4 of them. And one of our family values is courage. And so when I'm with our children and with my wife and I spot anybody doing something that takes courage, we celebrate courage. We say, wow, that's amazing, to our little son. That took real courage to do that, to go and say sorry to that situation. Or that took courage to go and have that adventure. And you really nailed it. You climbed to the top of that mountain. That took courage. And so because we've got that as a value, we celebrate courage wherever we see it. And as a result, we learn more about it. We hear more about it. I read quotes about it. And in focusing on a particular characteristic, psychologists will tell us that we can grow in that characteristic. As we focus on it, we learn more and we grow in it. So put courage in to help you overcome fear and failure. The action here, though, is this. I want to challenge you. Why don't you plan something that you know you're going to fail or have a serious amount of fear about and go and do it? I know that sounds crazy, but in planning to do that, what you're going to do is move into that, knowing that's what you're heading towards, and you're going to experience that emotion. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come out the other end and go, well, it wasn't that bad after all. The thing I was fearful of, or I thought would be a failure and maybe was a failure, hasn't ruined my entire life. Perhaps don't plan something that would ruin your entire life. But plan something and experience fear and failure just in normal day-to-day life and get used to that emotion and recognize it's not all that bad. That God can turn all kinds of things around and often uses those situations to build and strengthen us. So that's your action plan from here. Why don't we take a pause right now? And I want to ask you to be really brave. You're a few weeks into this series and hopefully a few more weeks into your HTB group. And it would be a brave thing for you to spend some time just talking about what are the things that you fear or the failures that you feel might be too big for you in order to overcome if you were to build God's kingdom. What are the things that you say to yourself, the fears that get too much into your mind and hinder you moving forwards? And if you are brave enough to share that with your group, that would definitely be something to be praying for one another about over these coming weeks so that we can help steel one another and put courage into one another. Take some time. Well done for being bold and having that conversation. So those are the first 3 muscles that we're learning from chapter 2. There are 3 more, 6 in total, and we're going to look at those next 3 next week. But I wanted just to finish by encouraging you to really take hold of the action points that we looked at during that session. There were 3 action points of those 3 points. And one of the reasons I wanted to really encourage you to take hold of those is that it's so important that when we're learning and we're growing from things that we're challenged by in the Bible, that we're actually putting those into action. You know, theology, ultimately, understanding God, learning about him, learning about his ways, is ultimately, it needs to be practical. It's got to be put into action. It can't just be left in our thoughts. This is an intention for God to live a different way. And so taking hold of those actions will help you to begin living a different way. And if you've got time before you finish, why don't you have a conversation about perhaps which one of those actions you're going to really focus on this week? Maybe taking all 3 is too much, but just one. Maybe for you, it's I'm going to ask every day that God would speak to me and I'm going to leave some time. Maybe it's for you, I'm going to journal every day and start writing about kingdom passions, things that are in my heart, and start writing about those things as well. Maybe you're going to plan something that you want to, that you're fearful of, or you think there might be failure at the end of for you, and you're going to experience that. And be highly accountable with one another. share what you're going to do and then hold each other to it this week. Maybe send a text to somebody in your HTB group and say, hey, how's that going? Have you managed that? And when you get together again, be ready to talk about what you've learned, how you've grown, how it's impacted you, even if you feel like nothing's changed, because that will help you in the journey of applying everything that we're learning. I hope you have a great week.